The Eagle by Alfred Lord Tennyson. He clasps the crag with crooked hands, close to the sun in lonely lands. Ringed with the azure world he stands. The wrinkled sea beneath him crawls. He watches from his mountain walls, and like a thunderbolt he falls. So this is a really short poem. A lot of critics have actually said this is a fragment and that it's incomplete, but I think that it is complete. It's a complete poem, and not only is it a complete poem, but it's a very resonant poem. There's only two stanzas, and stanza obviously is like Italian for room, two little bits, a three-liner and then another three-liner there with rhyming triplets. But the thing is, of course, yes, it's very short, and Tennyson's actually famous for doing very long poems like Ulysses and In Memoriam and so on. But this poem is one of the most resonant, powerful, and perhaps one of the best poems to memorize. So I've memorized it, and the reason I memorized it is because not only because of its shortness, but because it can be read in so many ways. It's one of those poems that you can keep going over and over in your mind, and you can unravel more things. That's the genius of it. It's short, but it's powerful. And some of the best ways to really wrestle with poetry and really understand poetry and make a poem your own, get it into your soul, is to memorize the poem. And obviously, rote memorization is not the best technique for memorizing or remembering anything or learning. And the shift in the educational system is quite rightfully moving away from rote memorization. However, rote memorization is very valuable when it comes to poetry, because the value of poetry is repetition. You don't skim read poetry. You don't read poems once. You read it, if a poem is powerful and moves you, you read that same poem over and over and over again across the course of your life. And in the reading over and over, you naturally memorize it. And memorization requires becoming at one with powerful imagery and powerful ideas. So the thing with this poem, well, one of the many things, I hesitate to pick it apart and analyze it too deeply, because it is most certainly meant to be a stand-in. The eagle's meant to be a stand-in for you and for all sorts of human issues. But if we read him biographically, and I do hesitate to read biographically, but sometimes it can be informative and it can be important. Alfred Lord Tennyson, he was poet laureate in the Victorian era, and this poem, by the way, The Eagle, was published in 1851. He was devastated by the loss of his friend Arthur Hallam. So devastated that he wrote and dedicated many poems to him. If you want to see one that's incredibly moving and incredibly filled with incredible amounts of grief, then go read In Memoriam. So his friend died, and I think he feels like this eagle that's close to the sun in lonely lands. Obviously, this is a personification, and if we didn't have the title, and a lot of how the eagle is described is very human-like, with his hands and the way he stands instead of claws, clasping the crag with crooked hands. So it's meant to be a stand-in for us, the reader. It's meant to be the stand-in for a poet. The poet as prophet, someone who is close to the sun, close to illumination, close to prophecy and vision. But of course, that's very lonely, and he's above all the turmoil and all that sort of stuff. The wrinkled sea can indicate or represent that. Maybe he's feeling very lonely and he's getting some perspective on his grief. He's seeing the wrinkled sea below. He's managed to get up high so he can analyse it from a distance. But this poem is also riven with the sublime, and the sublime was a preoccupation of many of the romantic poets. Think Wordsworth, I think maybe Keats, I think Shelley. And the sublime is, if you want to learn about the sublime, you should read Edmund Burke's philosophical treatise on the sublime. The sublime, everyone says, oh, that was sublime, this was sublime, this was sublime, and people use it interchangeably for wonderful or beautiful. But the sublime is very different from something that's beautiful, and it doesn't just mean great, it means sort of magnificent, but in a way that inspires awe. So William Blake's tiger is sublime because a tiger is very fearful and it could kill you. The eagle, with its power and being like a thunderbolt, you can imagine how fast it could be. It's predatory. Clasping the crag, on a cliff face. A cliff face is sublime because it inspires awe. And the wrinkled sea below, the eagle, who's kind of like above all of it and can see all of nature, is kind of like an overseer of nature. This is sublime. Beautiful is more like diminutive, miniature, pretty, delicate, and the sublime is just awe-inspiring. And I think it's amazing that something so short, a poem so short, this poem written in 2 stanzas of 3 lines with rhyme and triplets in iambic tetrameter, that means 4 beats per line, can be so resonant. Another thing that I like about this poem is just how much sound and meaning get wrapped up and intertwined with each other and mingled together. Like, you can hear with the alliteration, clasps the crag with crooked, these are very harsh sounds that velar sounds that create a sense of orally crookedness and roughness. And in that way, Tennyson was one of the most supreme poets. He's a bit old and dusty now. Many of his poems feel dated. However, he was one of the few poets that seemed to really understand the weight and texture and nuance of pretty much any word that he would use from the English language. He's an absolute master of the craft of rhythm, meter, imagery. And yes, many of his poems are dated, but poems such as The Eagle will never date, and they will be completely open to interpretation for many years to come. And so, hope you enjoy it. Try and memorize it. Let it get into your soul. Tell me, what do you think? Or tell me what you think the poem The Eagle means to you.